Hi, everyone. I'm Eugene Robinson with the Washington Post and MSNBC, and I'll be moderating what I think is going to be a fascinating and lively discussion with a great panel that we have here today. So just first, let me thank everyone here for inviting me and for hosting me for a variety of reasons. And one reason is that I didn't have to get up at 4 a.m. and go and argue with Joe Scarborough this morning, which is where I would have been otherwise. So you saved me some about 20 points worth of blood pressure, and I appreciate that. And also thanks for holding this discussion. We're going to be talking about the new America, diversity in the new America, which isn't even all that new, actually. It's been a birthing for a long time, and Senator Pugh and I were just talking. It's amazing that we even have to talk about the new realities of America at this point in the year 2015, but we do. And so we will. Let me introduce our panel. To my immediate left, Senator Catherine Pugh, the Majority Leader of the Maryland Senate. To her left, Representative Talmadge Branch, Majority Whip in the House. Let's see, to his left, we have Joe Miro from the Delaware House. And thanks for hosting us in Delaware. And to Joe's left, we have Linda Julius, the organizational vibrancy champion from DuPont, which is the real host in Delaware. So thanks so much. Thanks so much to the panelists. We're going to keep this informal. We're not going to do long opening statements or anything like that, because they tend to take up the entire time sometimes. But we want to get right to the discussion and also leave some time for questions and participation from the audience. So I always gravitate toward news, and so I'm gonna start with a topic that has been on everybody's mind. We just passed the 1-year anniversary of Ferguson. We all know what happened down the road in Baltimore after the death of Freddie Gray. And again, in the year 2015, we are talking about the theme Black Lives Matter, as if it were not obvious that they do. So let me start with you, Senator Pugh. What has Maryland learned in the months since the disturbances, and how much progress have we made, and where are we headed?
Well, let me just say, it was quite a learning experience for me as well, since I spent every day in the streets during the unrest that did occur in Baltimore. I think we're still learning. In fact, as a result of what has taken place, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate created a task force, of which both of us serve on, to look at policing practices in the state of Maryland. And I can tell you some of what I've learned thus far. We learned, for example, that 83% of the state police in our state of Maryland are all white. We live in a state where...
What's that percentage of the...
83.
83%.
In most jurisdictions, race is disproportionately represented across the state. In the various police departments, even in Baltimore City, where 20% of the police live in Pennsylvania, and a great deal don't even live in the city. And what we're learning, and still learning, is that, race is an issue, but at the same time, there are some things that we can do. We're learning that there's a disconnect between the communities and police departments. We also know that most police do come into those jobs to protect and serve communities, but yet at the same time, the practices that were 20 and 30 years ago don't really exist in our neighborhoods today. People knew their police officers. There were officer-friendly programs. They came into their schools. And there was a time, as you well know, that if you walked into a classroom and asked the folks sitting in the classroom how many people wanted to be a police officer, many would raise their hands. I don't think you see that today. So we're still in the process of learning in terms of what is best practices. And one of the things that we are looking at, because it's one of the suggestions that I've made, is that I believe that when you are patrolling streets that are as intense as some of the streets in Baltimore, that there ought to be some type of psychological evaluation, and we don't know because we're not the experts of police officers who have to go into those situations on a regular basis. What we also know is that what you saw in Baltimore, what you saw in Ferguson, is that there's not the same kind of economic justice that prevails in many of these environments. Because what we saw on television, and I kept saying every chance I got, was that what you're seeing is just a microcosm of Baltimore, that this is not all Baltimore. Baltimore is black, white, rich, poor. We have all races in our city and all income levels, but that's not what you saw on television. But what you saw were racially torn communities that had not been built up, had not been invested in. And what we're learning is that there's so many issues that need to be dealt with, whether it is the drug treatment centers that are up against people's neighborhoods, whether it is the lack of resources that have not been spread across the city. But this commission is supposed to look at these issues, and we're supposed to come up with best practices. And I said to one of my Republican friends the other day, please sit in on these hearings, because I'm not so sure, because people, when you set up these commissions, people have expectations. And I'm not so sure that we're going to get to where people want us to go. We sat for 4 hours and just listened to community people talk about what they thought we should be doing. And there's no consensus around that, except for the fact that people would like to know their police officers better. They want community policing. They want their neighborhoods to be safe. Everybody wants to be able to walk out of their door and see a neighborhood that they can be proud of. And we've got a lot of work to do, so we're working towards that. But I'm really concerned about our role in our commission in terms of what are going to be the real outcomes of this commission, because I think it puts a lot of pressure on us to come up with some solutions that people feel will have immediate change the day after we complete the commission. And I think that this is a long road to travel, a lot of investment in a lot of areas. And when you think about the 25,000 prisoners who come back to our communities on a regular basis, and we've not really prepared for them. And we in Maryland, again, and I said this at a diversity discussion at MACO, that I think that we can be one of the states that can lead, because we have a demonstration project now going on in Maryland where we're looking at the 25,000 prisoners coming out of our institutions and creating business opportunities, not just job opportunities. And people say, well, why would you do that? And because we believe that when you lift the least of us, you lift all of us. And so you got to provide those opportunities for people not to just have mediocre, as someone said, minimum wage jobs, but opportunities to be able to take care of their families.
Thank you. That's such an important question. I'm kind of going to go down the line. Talmadge?
And just to piggyback on what Senator Pugh said, just to add to everything, because she's absolutely correct. But many of the young people expressed, to all of us pretty much what some of the issues were. And in fact, they had a problem with there being a lack of recreation, a large lack of recreation and other things, drug treatment facilities and so on that Catherine mentioned. But I corrected it. But it is extremely important that we want the right face for Baltimore. We don't, what you saw on television is not exactly Baltimore City, but it was a group of people expressing what they were feeling. And it's been years and years of buildup that of what you saw, people expressing the fact that we need to do better, and the city needs to move in the right direction in terms of trying to provide what's best for them. So again, I'm just piggybacking on what the senator said. We do have a lot to do, and it's a lot of work to be done.
Can I just add something to that? Because I don't think we want to miss the point that you were raising in terms of Ferguson, Baltimore,
Yeah.
and other cities, because by no means do we condone violence, but I think Martin Luther King said violence is the voice of protest, not violence. Protest is the voice of those who feel that they've not been heard. This issue of mass shootings around the nation of unarmed individuals or black people, because all lives matter. But I think what the slogan Black Lives Matters means is that there are too many young black folk or black men dying in the streets of cities around this nation, being shot by unarmed, being shot by police. And so
Yeah.
that is an issue that this nation needs to deal with. And the question is, why? What kind of fear is instilled in individuals that they see someone of color that you feel that the only way you can be safe is to raise a gun and shoot someone? And that should not happen, not in this country
in the case
or
of-
any other nation.
In the case of North Charleston, South Carolina,
Absolutely.
even when they're running away, shoot them in the back. Joe, how did what happened in Baltimore and the whole Black Lives Movement reverberate in Delaware, and what impact does it have?
Well, what happened in Baltimore and what happened in Ferguson is not parochial to those two cities. It could happen anywhere in the country. And from my perspective, in order to really deal with those issues, what you need to do is to raise the level of education. You need to really make sure that the youngsters are getting the proper education, that they are attending school, and also to engage the parents. It is extremely important, no matter at what level of education you are trying to improve, that there is a parent involvement. I think that we also need to spend some of our time as legislators to make sure that the parents are engaged in the educational system of their youngster. Because if the parents are involved, there is no question that the end result of the educational process of the youngster is going to improve. In addition to education, I think we need to find jobs. I think one of the reasons why there is problems with drugs and problems in the streets is because our young people are not necessarily employed, and they don't have, if you're not employed, you don't have the money, which creates other issues in terms of what you may want to do in order to obtain resources, money. So we need to look at how we can employ our young people. And that is tied to education. If you have some kind of a trade, if you have some kind of a background that is employable, then you're going to get a job, provided that the job exists. And I'm not really talking about high-paying jobs, although that is something that perhaps we can talk about later.
Yeah.
But to make sure that the youngster is doing something, engagement in the schools and sports, after school courses and programs that may bring the youngsters to be busy and not on the street. Someone mentioned about recreational activities. There's a significant lack of opportunities after school for kids to go, and actually in some instances for adults also. You don't have places where you can go, and like when I was growing up, we always had places that you could go after school and in the evenings, and it was safe, and you could spend some time with your friends and relatives and socialize. We live in a society today that much of that is missing. So we need to open those opportunities for the youngsters to not be on the streets, doing some of the things that may create some problems. And of course, the third item is the drug situation. There is a significant in this area of Delaware, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore. There is a lot of unfortunately drugs, and that needs to be addressed. I'm not sure that I have the answer I'm not sure that anybody here has the answers to how we can curtail the drug issue that we have, but it needs to be looked at. We need to try to reduce the number of individuals that are users. And of course, all of this is tied together. Education, jobs, and activities that keep the youngsters involved so that they do not gravitate towards the drug and on the streets. But the issue that you started out with the question about Ferguson and Baltimore and some of the other cities, that could actually take place anywhere in the country. And it's not a reflection of the city of Baltimore. I think that we need to get away from that. I know what we saw on TV, but the city of Baltimore has a lot more to offer than what we saw on TV. And so does St. Louis and Ferguson. So.
Linda, we're going to get back to a number of issues that you raised in a minute.
Thank you.
But let me get to you on Black Lives Matter, viewing it from
from a corporate perspective. I guess when I think about it, I'm sure there were millions of conversations going on throughout the DuPont company individually around people talking about Ferguson and what's going on and what that means. But from the corporate perspective, I think what we try to do is look at what's going on internally and how can we impact. And when I think about the situation in Ferguson, a lot of that would be how can we educate our employees to think more about situations and to really think about unconscious bias, like what are the biases that go into some of the decisions or how people perceive other people. So we've had training around that for our employees to have them have a better perspective and be able to be more objective when they hear news like this and see things like that. As well as one of our core values in DuPont is respect for people. So we've done a lot of training of our employees around respect and what that means and how that looks in the environment. And we're hoping that some of that information is not only housed in our corporation, but that the employees would take that home and have those perspectives and share those perspectives with their families and their communities.
Quick question: How do you do this training? Is it gathering people together? Is it
so
online?
We do it in
how
different ways. So with our unconscious bias training, we actually have rolled that out to our leadership team, and that is in-face training, so classroom training. We also have some e-learning modules that we do around respect for people, and when we initially, from I guess 2010 to 2013, we rolled out our respect source of our strength training, which rolled out to all the employees. It was a global implementation plan. And that was a 4-hour training program that all employees were mandated to attend.
I'm going to stay with you for 1 second, Linda, because I did want to get to the issue of education, often dealt with at least K through 12 on more of a local level than a state level, but it's not as if states are not involved in it and don't have a stake in it. Is DuPont concerned about making the DuPont workforce look more like the new America? And if it's going down that road, how is it doing, and what issues does it see in terms of a gap between skills and job needs?
So I think DuPont, like probably all companies, is really concerned with making our company a much more diverse company. Because as we look at the demographics, right, of, like you said, the new America, we see that probably, and I think they're saying 2044, the majority will be the minority. The minority will be the majority population. And so we want to be able to attract that population, and we need to think about what is diversity? So I think particularly in the past, we've thought about diversity as only race and gender. And at DuPont, we're really trying to look beyond. We know race and gender is an issue, but they're, people with different abilities. We look at our LGBT community. We try to look at although ethnic diversity as well, but we want to have a total picture of what is diversity. And so we are really making some efforts to target diverse communities in order to have a representation in our corporation. So we're doing things like we established 2 years ago a diversity and inclusion council. So we have representatives from each of our businesses and each of our functions as a part of that council, and they are charged with developing a diversity strategy for their business function that ties into our overall global strategy. And that really is two-pronged. It's really to develop or foster an inclusive environment, and that's the first thing. And the second thing is really to hire a diverse talent. And so that is really our focus for the future.
And are you able to find a highly technical company like
Yeah, so you're right. It is
do you
difficult.
Find people,
Yeah.
you know,
So I
who
would
are
say that's
qualified.
one of our big challenges because of, we're a science company. We really look for people with science, technology, engineering, and math, those kinds of backgrounds. And so what we have done and what we do is we support a lot of the STEM programs, which really kind of target children from K through 12, getting them interested in these types of programs.
Yeah. So, Catherine, I want you to talk about this a little bit because there's because we're kind of wading into the issue of education reform, and we've had some experience with that in Washington, some controversy around. Someone I think put it best. We had a controversial school chancellor, Michelle Rhee, whom people in Washington tended to either love or hate, and someone put the issue as thinking about education reform as something to be done with a community as opposed to something to be done to a community. But that's not an easy thing. What are your thoughts?
But it is happening, and it should happen, and it's important to be inclusive in those areas. I know that in Maryland, for example, even when we were looking at engineering schools and research institutions, and my chairman happens to be sitting here, we had a bill looking at how do we create research grants for research institutions. And there was no thought about our black university, Morgan State University, who graduates more engineers, more people in those fields, biotechnology. Yeah. That was not even considered until we put it in the legislation, because we have a tendency to think that African Americans and people of color are not interested in those areas.
More black engineers than any other school,
engineers than any other school in the nation. Yeah. And then on top of that, I remember working with the NAACP for a number of years where we started 6th through 8th graders going to a Saturday university and bringing their parents so that they could get STEM training or get interested at a very early age. I think all of these things are really, really important, but also having America to face the fact that there is a race issue in this nation that we've not dealt with at every single level, because this is a conversation at this stage in the game that we ought not be having, because we should be included. When you talk about how do you move the country forward, how do you build wealth, and it's one of my mandates for me as an African American legislator, one of the things that I'm always focused on is economic development and economic opportunity, because I'm a firm believer that when you share the wealth, you build it up for all of us. And if you're not doing that, and here's something that I believe that most of us don't even realize as legislators, we're always thinking about the social issues, the criminal justice issues, but nobody thinks about the economic issues. And so, for example, when I came into the Senate, one of the first bills I did was asking the state to diversify its pension portfolio. $40 billion in pension funds. Of that $40 billion, $300 million was being shared with African Americans. Because of the passage of that bill, today it's $5 billion that's being shared with African Americans and other minorities, including women. If we don't bring that information to the table, it doesn't happen. University of Maryland, I sit on their board. When I got there, the spend across the board was 3%. Their pension portfolio is 27% African American, and now it includes Asians and Latinos and we're looking at Native Americans. Their spend across the board, when I got there, in terms of procurement, was 7%. Now it's 27%. And I'm saying that not we should not have to continue to have those discussions. They should be a part of the fabric of how we grow our country, grow our nation, how we become inclusive. When you're sitting there and looking around the room, you want to make sure that all of us are involved. If you're talking about a new America, which is, as you said, not so new, it's not just educating, because we can educate and educate, but if you don't think to include us in that process because we are a part of this nation, then it doesn't happen.
So when you talk about those economic issues, and those are great examples, Catherine. So there are some minority-owned investment firms now
Absolutely.
that have opportunities for growth and diversification and all sorts of things that they didn't have before. And I think we all have to be all in favor of that. But Talmadge, is there a gap? Is there a gap between the people who are able to take advantage of those sorts of opportunities, and a lot of other people who for whatever reason, because of accident of birth, because of where they live, because of the schools they went to, or whatever, don't have those skills, don't have those opportunities, aren't in that position to...
There is a gap. It's a big gap. In fact, Catherine and I both put a bill in not long ago that dealt with giving companies capacity, companies that couldn't grow, that wasn't growing, and that had the capacity but didn't have the wherewithal to move forward and to bring about that capacity. So the bill actually allowed a smaller company to purchase a larger company and have that larger company train them so that they could grow that smaller company to include and have that capacity to build, but they would be selling their overall company to that smaller company.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that we worked on. But at the same time, there's a big gap. Many times you'll find contracting companies that are looking for ways to grow, and they don't have the wherewithal with some of the other companies or non-minority companies. They don't have the ability to go to the bank to get a good loan, or they don't have the necessary means to make sure that they're able to do that. So they fall behind. They're unable to grow their companies. They're unable to do numerous things. But one of the things that Maryland, we don't do, I don't see that we do that much training in Maryland, at least, for those kinds of, we got a lot of bills, but I don't see a program that actually train business children or we have incubator businesses, but we don't have a training ground for growing minority companies.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the bill to allow prisoners to start their own businesses. And the reason I mention this is because I think you have to have it at every level. And I sold the idea to not just my chairman, but to the governor by saying, when I was campaigning once, I stopped at a local business. And I asked if I could put a sign up. And the guy says, sure, but do you remember me? And I'm like, no. He said, you want a graduation speaker? And I'm thinking high school, college. He said, no, in prison. I said, oh. He said, but I never forgot what you said. You said, guys, congratulations, got your GED, but let me just tell you, you got a hard road to toe. But if you have the capacity to start a business, do so. I said, because nobody walks into your business and says, hey, Joe, what's your background? Hey, Jack, what's your background? Hey, Sue, what's your background? All they care about is the quality of your service, so give good service. He said, that was me 5 years ago. This is one business. But when you get through, I want you to go across town and put a sign on my other business. And he said, everybody you see working here, these are ex-offenders. But they'll be great mechanics because they're going to get their ASCE license, whatever that is. But that's what I'm saying. It's the least, you got to lift the least of us.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. One of the strange things are happening this political year, you might have noticed, and we'll get to some of the strangest in a minute. But one of not the strangest, because we all know who the strangest is. But one of the stranger things that's happened is a sort of a convergence between some progressives and some on the right around the issue of sentencing reform.
Right.
I'm curious, so let me start with you, Joe. Is anything like that happening in Delaware? Because I know it's happening elsewhere, and what can come of this? But you have people like Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders, agreeing on these things.
Well, prison reform is something that has to be done. And we talked about education, we talked about what can we do to make sure that her experience in Maryland when she was campaigning, and here was a fellow that was the next one that had a business. That's one of the things that we're lacking. The training of the inmates so that when they are out, they are not returning to their same environment that they left. We unfortunately are not providing sufficient number of educational courses, whether they're technical or GED, and we do have it here in Delaware. Let's make sure that we understand that we do have some courses that we're offering to our inmates. But the fact of the matter is that we need more so that those individuals, when they're coming out, not only do not return to the same environment that they were in, but also that they have something that they can offer to a company to be hired. Our jails, and we only have 3 in the state of Delaware, one main jail in Smyrna, and one here in Wilmington, and another one in the lower county, Sussex County. When you look at the population, it is minority oriented, totally. Whether it's African American or Latino. So we really need to focus on seeking better opportunities for those individuals. And the other thing that we have is mandatory sentences. Mandatory sentences needs to be looked at, and a lot of the states in this region have the same, and that is creating an overcrowdedness in our jails. Some of the people that are there are not necessarily there for major offenses. They are in there for minor offenses. So we need to really evaluate that and give the judges a little bit more leeway as to what the sentence for the individual may be. But I'd like to touch upon, if I may, on the issue of diversity that you mentioned from DuPont. Diversity, as you said, comes in many different forms. It's not only a race diversity, it's a gender diversity, but it's also an immigration issue in terms of what is happening to our country. And most of you know that I'm an immigrant, first generation. If you do not know that, I'm originally from Cuba. Basically, what you have in our history is that immigration has been the fiber of the economy to this country. No matter how far you go, there has been groups that have come here and have done work, whether we like what they did or not. That's besides the point at this point for the dialogue. But they have been part of that growth of the American economy. And we need to have reform in our immigration policies for many different reasons. When you talk about education, we are allowing a lot of different individuals to come to study in this country, and they're coming with a grant or a scholarship to do these studies in science and math, and yet we're not really focusing on our own graduates and providing the opportunities that we were talking about earlier in terms of access to money, scholarships, grants, so that they can pursue the education that it is available or may be available at those universities. Because the diversity that we are seeing at the top in science and math is primarily from individuals that are coming from other countries. We need to graduate more students in the medical fields. We need to graduate more of our individuals that are living here in the science, in the math, in the engineering. And an effort has been made in the state of Delaware to achieve that. We had the Saturday school at the universities, the urban programs in the summer to entice students to go into the science areas. And both, we have, for those of you who are from out of state, we have basically 3 universities here in the state of Delaware: the University of Delaware, Delaware State, and Delaware Technical and Community College. The University of Delaware is well known for the engineering department, and they have done with DuPont, in partnership with DuPont and others, a significant effort, a significant program to attract minorities into engineering programs. And that has been successful, but however, that's not enough. We need to make sure that that our students, our graduates, have the opportunities to go on and encourage them to take those courses. In terms of program, which is important, the programs that we have at the universities here in Delaware are outstanding, but the engagement of the students, our graduates, the engagement of the Delaware graduates at those universities is not as high as it should be. They are, quite frankly, the universities do like to look at the region to bring students in, whether it's because they get more in their tuition, they generate more funds, but there is a disconnect between the admission of our graduates, and I'm talking about Delaware students, to the institutions here within the state, whether it's actually African American, Hispanic, or white. It doesn't matter.
Let's stay with immigration for a second, and now we can just go to the weirdest thing that's happening in the world right now, which is that Donald Trump is leading. Okay, he's leading the Republican field. There's a new CNN poll out. It just came out either last night or this morning that has him at 24%, a good 10 or more points, I think 10 or 12 points ahead of Jeb Bush and Ben Carson, Baltimorean, former, and on and on and on and on. And what he did over the weekend was to put out an immigration plan that basically says, kick all the undocumented out, build a wall. He didn't specify how high between the United States and Mexico. Make Mexico pay for the wall, which what can you say? I predict, these polls were done before this plan came out. I think his numbers will continue to go up, actually, in the Republican Party because, he's saying things that some Iowa primary voters, at least, really want to hear. Well, so,
Yeah,
do you want
but-
to jump in? Yeah.
You know, first of all, other than Native Americans, all of us are immigrants. You know, if we're against immigration, then we might as well remove the Statue of Liberty out of the harbor, because we say
I
bring
think that
bring
might
us.
be in the plan.
Well, you know,
I'm not sure. I think it's going to be a different statue. It's going to say Trump on it. It's going to, you know, it's going to have weird hair. But anyhow, go ahead.
and maybe if he gets elected, that would be in the plan. But
Yeah.
again, I think America needs to come to some realization in terms of who we are.
Absolutely.
You know, who we really are. Most of us are immigrants who came here. Some of us came not by our own will.
Sorry, voluntarily,
Yeah.
involuntarily,
Exactly.
whatever, but we can't.
And you know, and it's all about getting the work done, growing this country, growing an economy, and so yeah, I think immigration is something that we need to, as we did in the state of Maryland, figure out how do we be more inclusive of our populations when all of us have come in at different levels, have different issues. How do we fix it? And I think the discussion around race and race relations is something that we all need to have. And at the same time, when you talk about, you know, I went to the NCSL conference, and I think I mentioned this to you, and I was walking down the hall, and somebody said, well, how do you feel about this conference? And I said, you know, it's a great conference, but we don't really feel included because when you sent out your materials, there wasn't one person of color included in that brochure. You know, and so we're having this discussion because I said at the executive committee that, you know, we should be a part of every discussion. We should be on every panel. You know, everybody should be reflected because when you do that, you hear everybody's ideas. And guess what? When everybody's ideas are poured into the pot, the solution that comes out is better for all of us. And that's what I think we as a country need to face, and we need to deal with it. You know, it's not just the Donald Trumps who, you know, who see this as just an opportunity to do whatever he's trying to do, whether he's trying to become president or like some folks like to be seen and heard. That's what he wants to do, and he can afford to do it. But we in America have a responsibility to be responsible to all of the citizens that live in this country, and we have the responsibility to make sure there's equal justice, equal economic opportunity for all of us.
I think that's an entirely reasonable approach. Reasonable summary of the situation, analysis. We do not live in reasonable times, however, apparently.
But reasonable minds
Well,
need to
there are
prevail.
many reasonable minds out there. But one of the things that it seems to me, and I'm sorry, but we have to analyze this with some seriousness now, because guess what? I mean, you can look up and, you never know what's going to happen. One of the things that I think, one of the nerves I think Donald Trump has hit, and it's reflected in his poll numbers, is it's not a majority of the population maybe, but a certain feeling out there of or tendency to scapegoat immigration as responsible for all sorts of economic woes and dislocations that really have to do with globalization and lots of large trends that have been going on for a long time that we all know about. But people look at a place to point the finger, and he seems to be hitting a nerve there. Talmadge?
He's striking a nerve for some people.
Yeah.
You have a group out there that's going to support his angle, but at the same time, I don't think that's most of what America wants to see. I don't think that's it. I think that he's playing to the tune of what he has to do in order to get his numbers up. He knows that there are a group of people out there that have issues with immigrants, and he at the same time is using that to build upon his numbers. But I don't think that America wants that.
Joe, how do you see the phenomenon?
I don't think that on his plan that he just released over the weekend, there is not going to be a wall built.
No,
in
of
this
course
country.
not.
So that's
none of it is going to happen.
That's just a ploy to get the reporters to write articles and to have interviews,
Yes.
And it's working.
and maybe raise a little bit of.
Media has to take some responsibility. I mean,
Well,
really.
you have to take some
You
responsibility.
do, because what Trump is playing for, if you look at the polls, who votes? Who votes? And we've got to educate folks to get to the voting booth.
Yeah.
But, he's playing to the voters, and he's playing to the numbers, and he's playing to the polls.
Yeah, but I give the voters a little bit more credit. I think that they're a little bit more intelligent than what is being said. There is, in terms of immigration, there needs to be an immigration reform in this country. Yeah. We need, number one, we need to secure the southern borders. And we often talk about what is happening in the southern borders, but we also need to look at the northern border, because a lot of things are happening, and there's some Canadians sitting in the audience, and you know that the border that we have with Canada has a significant amount of water. And I have actually participated in an evaluation of both the northern border and the southern border. And the southern border is, we all know, there is no fence. There will never be a fence. There may be some wire thrown around, chicken wire thrown around to delineate the boundaries between Mexico and the United States. We do have a technology to make our borders safe. We do have cameras. We have different type of technology that we can make our border in the southern part, the southern border, safe. And we need to accomplish that. But we also need to look at the northern border. There's a lot of lakes, there's a lot of water, and when you look at the northern states, Maine, for instance, and Wyoming, you have some issues in this country from people crossing the border, the northern border, from Canada. But in addition to that...
Don't tell Trump. Don't tell Trump.
But in addition to that, the issue with immigration is a worldwide problem.
Yeah.
It is not a problem that is parochial to the U.S. When you look at Europe, they're having problems. Mexico is having problems with immigration from the border states, border countries below them. Puerto Rico is having a significant issue with people coming from Haiti and Santo Domingo. And so immigration has been a problem throughout the history of the world and will continue to be. Yeah. What we need to do is to provide a path for visas, if that's what folks want to come into this country. On April 1st, we just heard yesterday that they provided 84,000 visas to foreigners to come here. Within 3 days, there were 240,000 applications.
Sure.
All right, for that pot of visas that were being given. So we need to really look at what is happening, how we can do that. We need to provide some kind of path for legalization of those individuals that are here illegally, because we're not going to deport 12 million people.
We're not going to have,
the economy of this country cannot afford that. Number one. Okay?
Yeah. No, that's not going to happen.
So we need to find that the path to make sure that those individuals have a way to acquire.
Again, you're being far too reasonable.
Well,
Linda,
and as far as Donald Trump, I don't think that we need to talk about him because he's not going anywhere.
Come on, y'all.
Okay. That's what I've been saying for months, and he keeps going places. But go ahead.
The only thing I would say is that I think immigration is an issue. It's something that needs to be addressed, and we probably haven't addressed it in the best way. However, I think that this whole popularity of Donald Trump, I think that he speaks to a portion of America that is not happy with how things are, and some way wants to maintain a very I'm going to say, strict kind of status quo about what America is going to look like in the future. And so I guess for me, it's like we need to have some options around how to address that issue that might be somewhat appealing maybe to that population to make the changes that we need to make in America.
Well, I mean, it's a difficult thing to reconcile because my former MSNBC colleague, Pat Buchanan, remember Pat? Pat would say it to your face. He's like, this used to be a white country, and and it's not anymore. And we can't have that. I mean, and so there. Good morning.
Well, I think I can speak loud enough. Oh, there you go.
No,
Thank
gotcha.
you. Helene Keeley, Wilmington, Delaware. Welcome to Wilmington
Thank
and
you.
welcome to Delaware. One of the co-hosts here, and the conversation is very good. But I think, I want to ask a question because I'm here to learn. My district is here in the city of Wilmington. It is a minority district, and I've been elected in the same district for 19 years. And in my areas where it is predominantly African American, I go there and I talk to the folks and I very bluntly say to them, look, I don't know what it's like to be you, but what I need to know is how I can help you. And I want to know. I mean, I want to know from the elected officials here that what can we do? What can we as elected officials do to help people of color? I mean, we're doing a lot of things in this state. We decriminalized marijuana. We banned the box. We are doing really progressive things to help. And not just African Americans, anybody, that considers himself a minority, to advance them. We're starting a pilot program here in Wilmington where 2 people are going to go out into specific targeted areas where we know unemployment is extremely high and work with those individuals to get them tested on their education level. If they need remedial training, we're going to help them with it and hopefully get them into a GED program or a certificate program so that they can become employed. But as someone who represents a majority minority district, I want to know what I can continue to do to help, because I don't want people to feel that they are disenfranchised, that we live in a society where they don't believe that they have worth.
Well, let's go down the line, and I'll ask everyone to just quickly,
I think
in practical terms,
I think
name a couple of things.
A couple things. First, just to make sure that we're included in every opportunity. Whether it's education, economics. You want to make sure your schools have what they need, that the supplies and everything are there. That any opportunity that is available in any other community is made available to the community that you serve. And also be conscious of the African American business community and those communities that can afford to be a part of your solution. Because oftentimes I think we forget that there are those, everybody in the black community is not black, poor, and in real trouble, but there are those who have the capacity and the capability to assist you as you go into those communities. Because oftentimes when the state is even jump-starting programs, they're looking at programs to start something as opposed to programs, and I think Talmadge mentioned it earlier, to expand upon what we're already doing. Are there businesses in that community that can partner with you, whether it is in the educational system, whether it is in your development of playgrounds and programs that continue to help those individuals excel, because they need to see people who look like them who are successful as well. And so I think it's partnering with, as you probably well do, but making sure that those resources come into those communities, those opportunities are available to them, but partnering with the business community and the individuals around you who can assist you in continuing to be successful as a legislator.
Talmadge?
And without repeating what Catherine said and what others are going to say, I'm sure, I just want to say that it's a loaded question. It's a lot of needs in the of color community. Supporting the poor is important in terms of legislation or programs within your community. That's important because you'll find the vast majority are poor. And then again, supporting the inclusion of African Americans or any other ethnic group. I am about an eighth of Native American, and I am the son of a medicine man. And I represent the Native community, and there are a number of issues even there that I know you don't represent that, but I don't know how many may be in your district, but they have issues as well. So, and then as you have the Hispanics, so each of those areas of color have specific and many the same, mostly the same, but some are different needs. So I think you have to look at each cultural group that exists within your community to figure out the best way to help. And of course, you can always ask the community, and they can tell you.
Joe, just a couple of quick things.
Education is education, reducing the dropout in the urban areas is one of the key factors, and trying to provide some type of employment for the youngsters who are hanging around in the corners and doing some of the things that they should not be doing. Access to opportunities that there are a lack in the urban areas is the answer. And there is no one answer to the issue that you bring up. I think it's a conglomerate of resolutions to that problem. You have the issue of drugs, and that to me is a very key factor in Wilmington. I'm not sure how you can resolve the drug problem because we are centered in the corridor between New York and Baltimore and Washington.
Wilmington do that.
So it's difficult to control that because it's coming from many different angles.
Yeah, right. And you're surrounded by.
Well, I would say that you started by asking the community. I think you have to ask them what the issues are. I think they have to be involved in prioritizing the issues and also be a part of the solution. So those would be my advice, and also partnering with community organizations that already exist to meet some of the issues that need to be addressed.
I would just add, just to try to be as practical as possible. I would think, I came to, I'm going to date myself here. I started at the Washington Post 1 year into Marion Barry's first term as mayor. Back when he was a very good mayor, actually, in my estimation. I think almost the most impactful municipal program I ever saw was Marion Barry's summer jobs program for youth in Washington, D.C. I cannot tell you how many by now middle-aged black professionals I run into who, when they learn I once covered Marion, say, I got my first job for Marion Barry. I got my first job. It was a summer job. Now, he totally busted the budget to fund this, right? Because he did, and it was not, even back then, and budgets are tighter now and this and that, but that really, it had a tremendous impact, not just immediately, but over a generation or more than a generation, and people, who went on to become very successful in life. Others who were not, meteorically successful, but who got that habit of working, who stayed out of trouble, who took a path much better than a different path they might have taken. So that's just the most practical thing.
In Baltimore, we have a summer jobs youth program, and I'm sure you all do too. And what we also did was involve the churches. And so I collected like $20,000 from the churches just in a few weeks to say support the summer jobs program, because you don't want to bust the budget. And so I said, can you imagine if we do this all year long, how much money you all will raise, so that when we get to the summer jobs program, we're not screaming and asking for money. So corporations donate, and I think the mayor, that's one of the good things that we have as well, is making sure.
I think you said the best thing, Catherine, is really just to make sure that everyone is at the table.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think if we continue to make sure that we treat people the way we ourselves want to be
To be
treated,
treated,
the whole world will be a better place.
absolutely.
We have another question. We have a microphone up there, so.
Yeah, no, it's not a question, but I'm going to comment a bit. First of all, I'm going to say something about Trump. I'm a Canadian senator. We just have one Senate in Canada. They're not at provincial level. It's just national. I'm also from Toronto. And, listening to this actually makes me feel pretty proud about Toronto because, we are one of the most multicultural cities in the world. We really are. We have about 6 million people. But huge communities like I believe the Chinese community is over 500,000. And I'm sitting beside a lady from that community who's a member of our legislature, of whom I'm very, very proud. And our elections do have a lot of people from different parts of the world. Like we have a couple 100,000 Koreans. They are incredibly successful in business. We hardly, we don't have a large black community, and to the extent we have one, it's nearly all from the Caribbean. But we don't have any Americans moving up, but we'd love to have you if you want to come. And,
We're going to watch this Trump thing very carefully, okay?
okay.
And
Well, I just had to give the multicultural
I appreciate the
commercial for
invitation.
Toronto. But Trump, look, half my family live in the States. I've been in Canada the whole time, but so I know it quite well down here. But Trump is so embarrassing. Canadians just cannot believe that people are taking this guy seriously, and women in particular. Some of the comments that he has made and the words he have used, I will not even repeat.
okay, well,
those
let
words.
me give you two
It's
words back.
embarrassing.
Rob Ford, okay?
Forgot about him.
Well, you're right. And nobody's perfect, but at least we finally got rid of him. Well, he is a city councilor member, and he represents a strange area. But in any event, I hear you. But,
Oh, yeah.
okay,
So,
I'm going to ask my colleague, of whom I'm very proud, from the Chinese community and a very successful legislature in the legislature of Ontario.
So I do want to comment about the state government and how you invest your future. I hear about the taxes and what have you. We are taxed in Ontario, and I'm proud of the taxes we gave. And I know this year, for the last couple of years, we have now funded year-round programs for employment opportunity for our young people. Okay? So I know we just cut a check to the City of Toronto, to the Toronto Police, up to the tune of $4.7 million. Okay? So I know employment is absolutely critical. I also know that you have no future if you don't do education, and I'm proud of our education system, and you need to do more in education, coming from that sector. My question to the panelists, one of the issues right now confronting the entire province of Ontario, the issue of carding, of profiling, whether it is black community young people, the Somali young people. I want to hear your conversation and to talk about the issue of profiling and carding, because this is an issue affecting the City of Toronto. Yes, we did appointed the first black police chief ever in the City of Toronto. And the carding means that the police pull you over, you have to bring some documentation. Yeah. They only pinpoint black Canadian youth.
Well, we call it
okay.
stop and frisk.
Whatever they call them, okay? But
yeah.
in the Northern Ontario, they card or profiling Aboriginal young people. So I would love to hear your conversation about this particular issue.
I can just run this down. I mean, this is an issue. The stop and frisk policy in New York City, for example, under Mayor Bloomberg, in which in what were designated as high crime areas, police could essentially randomly stop and frisk, generally speaking, young men. And statistically, it turned out what they were doing was stopping and frisking young black or Hispanic men, period, and not white men. And this was taken to court, and a federal judge ruled the practice unconstitutional. Among the evidence that was cited was that while this was supposed to be a program designed to get illegal weapons off the street and find drugs and other contraband, that of the few whites who were stopped and frisked under this program, they were found to be more likely to be carrying guns or to have drugs or be committing some crime than the large numbers, on a percentage basis, than the large numbers of African Americans or Hispanics who were being stopped and frisked. And the judge essentially, in the opinion, he didn't use this line, but it was like, would it kill you to stop and frisk a couple of white guys every once in a while, And so it was ruled unconstitutional. The policy was since changed there, and I think it's safe to say that, with notable exceptions such as Ferguson and other places where you've seen this sort of thing happen. Remember, that began when Michael Brown was stopped for jaywalking. This sort of nuisance policing, which is also called broken windows and stop and frisk and whatever, it is, I think, and I certainly hope, beginning to fall out of favor and something of a return to a community policing philosophy, and I personally, just from my viewpoint, would encourage that.
Yeah, I don't know if you have racial profiling laws, because we do in the state of Maryland. And what you do is you require documentation. And what we found is that as long as you're requiring that documentation, that the number of racial profiling cases that were occurring in the state of Maryland began to drop. I also wanted to add one other thing in terms of one of the things that I remember when President Obama, and this is not on that particular topic, but one of the things President Obama asked us to do was to raise the compulsory attendance age to 18, and people thought, so what does that mean? I can tell you that we did that in the state of Maryland, but we put in place a number of issues as it related to the dropout age, because I don't know what your dropout ages are in your various states, but in some states they were as low as 12, some as low as 16, 15, and what people don't understand is that those laws were made years ago when children left school to go to the farms or to go help their families or to go work at Bethlehem Steel, and they could make a decent living. Well, that doesn't happen today. But when you talk about education reform, that's one of the things that we need to go back and do. I can tell you in Baltimore City, we had a 10.98% dropout rate, and now ours is down to 4.5, almost consistent with where the state's dropout age rate is. And so that is something that I would hope that all of our states would look at, is what is your state's compulsory attendance age, because it does make a difference, because a child should not have the decision-making authority that they can walk into a school at the age of 15 and say, I'm turning 16 tomorrow, I'm done. Because they make a decision that impacts the rest of their life.
Let's have the next question.
The comment you made about stop and frisk is actually very consistent with drug use and drug abuse throughout the country. It knows no racial, it knows no socioeconomic bounds. Heroin deaths from overdose are every bit as likely in the white community. The problem is that white people get treatment and black and poor people get prison, and that's got to stop. It's wrong, and it has to stop, and that's something that I feel like I have to say. And just one brief comment on Trump. The reason the reason a statement about John McCain didn't change the polling is because people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham and other leaders did not say anything when Max Cleland, who was a triple amputee, was his patriotism, and John Kerry was swift-boated. The base doesn't, they're immune to comments like that anymore, and I find that repulsive. I wish they had had the same statements when those things happened that they've had when John McCain was.
I just think
Am I controlling it? No.
the sort of laws of political gravity don't seem to be applying right now, and I'm not sure. I confess, I don't fully understand it. But there's something about not just what he's saying, but the way he's saying it, that for whatever reason, it's crazy, but it's getting a response from people. It is. I'm sorry. Who's next?
I have the microphone, so I guess it's me.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
In the front
Whoever's
row.
got the microphone.
I'm
gets
from,
to speak.
Gordon Johnson from New Jersey, next to New York City,
Yeah, I kind of know.
in case you didn't know that.
Governor Christie's place.
He's doing a fine job for the state. We've had 9 downgrades by the bonding agencies. Not to mention their little bridge problem. I hear about this racial profiling and the police attitude. Police officers, I was a police officer years ago, and a sheriff, also in the military. But I don't, and the police department is a quasi-military organization. Therefore, it has a chain of command. And I would think that if a police chief or a police director says, I will not tolerate profiling in my department, you'll treat everyone with respect in the street, and any type of behavior that is deemed to be that way, there'll be some disciplinary action in my department. He or she can say that. I think the attitude changes. It's a chain of command there.
Yeah.
And I'm not hearing that being discussed by or brought up by people.
I think that's a great point, and I would argue that our police chief in Washington, Kathy Lanier, has done exactly that. Actually, I mean, she has made clear that that's not her style, and that's not the way her
It will not be
her
tolerated.
and it will not be tolerated. And in fact, I think just objectively, relationships between the police department and the community are, 1,000 times better in Washington than they are in a lot of.
And a second,
I think, too, the revolving door of police commissioners has changed the attitude of the community towards the police department, because I think different police chiefs come in with different philosophies, and oftentimes they think that it's so political that they're listening more to the politicians in some ways, in terms of, as you stated, the chain of command that demands a certain amount of respect.
Right.
I see that currently with our new police commissioner, who is demanding a certain amount of respect to the community by the police department. I even feel a different attitude when I'm walking the streets among the police officers because of his attitude. It always, as you would put it, emanates from the top.
and another quick point, and I'll relinquish the microphone to my
Yeah.
colleague back here. Education. We have to check our dropout rates in high school, nationwide.
Yeah.
Our dropout rates are astronomical in this country. And as the senator said before, they must have a good idea. If they drop theirs down to 4%, New Jersey's is higher, much higher than that. And if you look at these statistics nationwide, our dropout rates are just too high,
Yeah.
which creates, of course,
Okay.
lack of opportunity, of course, as we all know.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick question, because I know the microphone needs
Yeah,
to go over there,
microphone
because
has
those
to come
people
over
have been
here.
definitely waiting. But I do have a real quick question that piggybacks on what
Yeah.
you were saying. Senator Pugh, in your findings of what happened in Baltimore, was there anything about the way police officers are evaluated? And what I mean by that, I know in corporate America, if we want to drive a certain behavior, then we put incentives around that behavior. But if police officers are incentivized by the number of arrests, the number of traffic tickets, that's going to drive a certain behavior. So I'm just wondering, in your study, was anything found in that area?
Let me just say, we're into I think the 4th meeting of our commission, and that is one of the issues that we're looking at. What drives tickets and all those kinds of things? Are there incentives as opposed to incentives for good behavior? So that is a part of that discussion as well. Thank you for that.
I think it's on.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie T. Bolden, State Representative here in the city of Wilmington, and you are currently in the 2nd Representative District, so welcome.
Thank you.
My question goes to voting. We're on the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and we know that in 2012 there was 64% of African Americans that voted, and in 2008 there were 66.2% as a result of President Obama, the first African American to run for president. When we look at Ferguson and other areas of the cities and the states, we have to look at the voting. And my question goes to, how do we educate politically how important it is for African Americans to vote in order to bring about change. As a result of Ferguson, when they did go to the polls, they were able to elect a police chief, commissioner, attorney general, I believe, and some others. But this seems to be one of the biggest problems in the United States and here in Delaware in the turnout of African Americans voting. So I'd like the panel to give their opinion on how do we educate, if you have one on that, to the political process, because I think we forget how we got to this point of being able to vote and how many lives had to suffer as a result of the voting. We know about Selma, we know about Martin Luther King, but we don't take that into accord when it comes to voting.
I think we've educated, and apparently, to me, it appears that the voting in Maryland seems to exist around emotion. So if something occurs, or I'll give you a good example, we just lost an election in last year. We now represented by another party, and now when I go to community meetings, they're complaining and they're upset, but they're the one. But they stayed home. They didn't come out. They you know, and it's, if they're excited about somebody or if they're excited about an issue, it seems that that's what drives them out to the polls. But if it's kind of, you know, mediocre and the candidates aren't exciting, and or the issue at hand, or if they don't like a number of candidates, they stay home.
About that?
I just think there's a certain apathy in America right now, and so I'm not sure what we need to do to shake that up. But I mean, people want a change, but it just seems like in some way the masses feel somewhat hopeless and really impacting.
Yeah. Well,
So
But,
I'm not
we
sure.
had elections in schools.
yeah.
We ran for offices when we were in school, and we don't do that as much anymore.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't wait to vote when I grew up because my parents made it look like it was something really important because they got dressed up.
Well, I
They
grew up
looked
in
like
Orangeburg,
Sunday,
South Carolina,
you know.
so my parents couldn't vote.
Yeah.
So, you know,
But
so
African Americans know. They know the history. They know what it took for us to get here. They know how it was in the '60s to just get a person a right to vote. They know that. But why? I really
It's
wish I
the
had an
economic inequalities. If you walk out of your house and you've been walking out of your door for 20, 30 years, and the house that was burned out and the house that was boarded up is still boarded up, you feel like politicians aren't doing their share. They're not doing what they need to do, and so they don't feel that participating in that process is important. And so we've got to instill and engage young people at an early age. I know that one of the things that we do at the state central level is look for the youngest people that we can find to engage them in that electoral process, to show them how they can get elected and get involved. I think it is our responsibility to engage them, to involve them, to be in those schools, and to make it as important as it should be, because it is the factor that helps to change the communities and the outcomes for you.
but in some communities, in quite a few communities, in 2012, for example, even at times in the face of new voter ID laws or restrictions on voting, there. Around Cleveland, for example, and I think in Ohio in general, African Americans voted in higher percentages than white Americans. So it's not that we can't do it. Okay, it can be done. And I think one of the key things is making it possible for people to vote. I mean, we make it, African American voters waited on average a half hour longer than whites did to vote for president last time. That should be a national outrage. I mean, that should be unconstitutional. That should be that should not be possible. I'm not sure if this Supreme Court agrees with me.
We have to keep thinking of the new methods. I mean, there are always different methods, but we have to come up with an ideal method of making sure we're able to get people to the poll, be it training, be it programs, be it whatever, It's still important that we do that and make sure we're able
Let's
to.
keep getting questions. Who's got the mic?
Yes. I guess this
And
is
then we
on.
have a question behind
Okay.
you. One more.
I know we kind of touched on it, but I know the whole country, I know I am, is outraged about all these unnecessary killings that are taking place when we see our young black men and women stopped in the streets and white. What else can we do to send a message as legislators to our police officers and to say, this has to stop? You know, we talk about sensitivity training and other things. What is going to be that hardcore message to have them stop before our citizens start revolting and killing our officers, and we got good officers?
Well, one thing I like to say, right now I'm noticing a lack of respect already in my city for police officers. They'll throw rocks at them, they'll throw, cans, bottles. As a result of this, and I don't know where it's coming from that we've suddenly lost this respect for police, but I'm assuming it's as a result of so many of the senseless deaths. Some people, as you know, have died and haven't even really committed a crime, but have actually died at the hands of police officers. I represent the Native American Caucus of state legislators. It happens in Indian country. But the reason you don't hear about it that much is because it's on a reservation. Very seldom do you get a lot of things that leak off of a reservation unless someone tells the story or leaks it. But it's happening not just here, it's happening all over. And we have to figure out collectively, that's why this commission is in place that we have, to try to figure out what is the answer for this kind of activity.
Who's got the mic now? Sir?
Well, I would like to make a comment on that,
Okay.
if I may. I know what is being said about sensitivity and training for the public safety individuals, but I tell you, I have a lot of friends, and there are many individuals that are elected in Delaware that have the background of being in the police department or in the state police. And their job is very difficult. Their job, they are actually putting their lives at stake anytime they go out of their homes. And we criticize the public safety people a lot, but I think we also need to give them a lot of recognition for what they do to try to protect us and to try to keep us safe. I know what has happened. I know the issue that has been brought up in terms of race, but in addition to that, I think that often the police departments do not get the credit that they should receive in terms of what they do, how they sacrifice their time to protect all of us, and how their families also sacrifice their lives when the spouse is not home to be with their family. So I think there are two sides to this coin, but we all need to work towards a better relation, no question about that. But at the same time, we need to recognize what they're trying to do for us.
Yeah, well, I personally have never seen a low-income community that did not need and did not want effective community policing.
I think I haven't seen any community that doesn't
Exactly,
want effective
exactly.
community policing.
Every community wants that. The question is how you get it and what's appropriate. Yeah.
Two things. One, I think we got to change the conversation, because right now, police come into poor communities to enforce the law, and they go into other communities to protect the law, to protect the community. So there's a mindset that needs to be dealt with. We need to look at these police commissioners, make sure that they really understand what community policing is all about. Because it's in some places, community policing is CompuStats. look at data and then follow data and profile from the data. In other communities, you have conversations going on between communities and police. And so I think we have to keep that conversation going and engage in activities that allow folk to work together rather than work against one another. And I think through it all, bring back the dignity of man, the dignity of human beings. Because so often you have police that look at communities that because they're poor, then they have no dignity, and so therefore have to treat them a different kind of way. And whether and as my grandmama used to say, I might be feeling hopeless, but I'm not helpless. And there's some things that we can do. Going back to that voting issue, I just played that song from Janet Jackson. What have you done for me lately? As far as the millennials are concerned, and as far as a number of other people, they want to see some relationship between the science of representation and or politics and the challenges that they face from day to day. And so we as elected officials have to find a way to take that policy and take the politics of what we do and translate it in a way that makes sense for the young people that's going to college, or for the families that are without food, and communities where poverty is ripping apart the communities. I mean, I've visited a couple places where there's some young people growing up thinking that their community is Beirut, while others think their community is Baghdad. So what we got to do is find a way to connect, take what it is that we do, and connect to what folk are facing from day to day.
Yeah, well, connection is what it's all about. Listen, our time is, unfortunately, I'm told our time is up. We have time for one more? One more. We'll do one more.
Hello, my name is Jackie Jenkins, and I'm from here in the city of Wilmington representing the mayor's office. And I wanted to respond to the question in terms of what can we do for our young people. The mayor has a comprehensive education initiative, which is largely centered around dropout prevention strategies. Our education initiative is absolutely a byproduct of crime. We've just recently accepted President Obama's education initiative, My Brother's Keeper. We're hosting our local action summit in October. We have an Adopt a School program initiative. We have reading readiness, kindergarten readiness, dropout prevention, mentoring programs, adjudicated youth. We need partners. So if you want to know what you can do, we need partners to help us out because the city does not have the resources to be able to offer the programs that all of our young people need. We need our business community, our community service organizations, our churches to be a part of this initiative. So we're asking you to be supportive and come out in October. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I think
I just wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I just wanted to say one thing, and one was to thank everybody for being here, and to thank CSG for doing this panel, and for us all to recognize that us working together, we can make a difference, and learning how to respect and dignify each other, I think will make a difference. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank everyone for coming. My name is Debbie Page. I help to coordinate the panel, and I want to really thank our panelists for agreeing to do it, and you've done such a wonderful job. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you all.
As an appreciation, we'd like to offer a small token
Oh,
to
well,
everyone.
thank you. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you.
And there's also a book signing directly following outside.
Thank you very much.